Hey everyone, this is Mike from the Comic Book Trove here with my first video of 2022, and I hope that everybody's had a good holiday season and new year. I've been kept pretty busy myself during that time, so it's been a little while since I put a video out now. But finally I'm getting a chance to do a review today, so I'm going to be taking a look at the Spider-Man by David Michelinie and Erik Larsen omnibus today. So we'll give an overview of the book, we'll talk about some of the contents, and obviously I'll share my thoughts. Firstly, you've got this cover here. Classic kind of Erik Larsen cover featuring Spidey, Ghost Rider, Deathlock, and Human Torch, and even a tiny bit of Mr. Incredible's face there, I think. The design of this book, the dust jacket and some of the interior, is very similar in design to the Spider-Man by Todd McFarlane omnibus. That's the adjectiveless Spider-Man. And what you're really getting in this book is the continuation on from McFarlane's run on both Amazing Spider-Man and then also just Spider-Man. The cover gallery here shows the issues included, and you can see down there as well the contents of what you're getting in here. So Erik Larsen, he succeeded McFarlane as the artist on both of those series, and this is what you're getting in here. It's pretty much everything that's been drawn by Erik Larsen relating to Spidey over the years. If you've seen my review of the Todd McFarlane Spider-Man omnibus, or if you have that book yourself, or you've just seen it elsewhere, maybe you see what I mean when I talk about the design on the interior here. These opening pages of the book, the style of the table of contents, very similar to that book. So seems as though they were going for a kind of deliberate matching set kind of thing going on. And so you open up with these fill-in issues. There is actually a little bit of text that explains why these are here, these kinds of odd issues, these single issue inclusions. This is actually stuff that double dips with the Spider-Man by Michelinie and McFarlane omnibus, because these were the fill-in issues that came towards the back of McFarlane's run, where Erik Larsen was kind of guest penciling at that point. And then of course, a couple of issues later, McFarlane left for good. He went off to do his own Spider-Man series, and at that point Erik Larsen took over properly with issue I think 329. And really you can see from, I think, the style of Erik Larsen's work that he was going for, I think, a very deliberate kind of continuation of the style that was set by McFarlane, which made sense for him to do that because, whilst McFarlane had been the artist on Amazing Spider-Man, the series had seen a huge boost in popularity and sales, so it was a style that, attracted a lot of people. And I've said before that when McFarlane took over the book, Amazing Spider-Man, it was really the most dramatic shift in artistic style, comparing his artwork to the work of previous artists on the series since John Romita Sr. had taken over from Steve Ditko, I would say. And it was really a more drastic change than that, to be honest. It was a huge shift in style when McFarlane took over, and artists following on from McFarlane, I think, very much emulated that kind of style. And you see that going on here with Erik Larsen. Now, what I will say though, I think I've got to be upfront and honest about this from the beginning, really, from this early stage of the review, and just say that for me, I'm really not a huge Erik Larsen fan. I'm not a big fan of his artwork on this series. To me, it's just kind of inferior Todd McFarlane work. Now, I know that might be something that any Erik Larsen fans are wanting to kind of shoot me down for right now, and I get it. If you're a fan of his work, I'm not saying that it's bad, but I don't know, it's really inconsistent for me, because there'll be some pages in here, some panels where I think it looks great, and others where, like this cover for example, it just looks so weird. And don't get me wrong, obviously McFarlane drew all kinds of weird anatomy for Spidey, but it just doesn't look as good for me when it's Larsen's work here. In terms of the story, we're still in the era here very much where Peter Parker and Mary Jane are married. We'd already seen some of that in the Michelinie McFarlane run. So, we've got more of that going on in here. At the same time, you've got the kind of real reappearance of the Black Cat. Again, she'd appeared briefly during the McFarlane-Michelinie run, but she comes back properly in this run here with Erik Larsen drawing her. And she's actually dating Flash Thompson as well, which is pretty cool. So yeah, that's pretty interesting to see that, because obviously he's not aware that she's Black Cat. He just thinks he's dating this beautiful girl called Felicia Hardy. And she's basically dating Flash to mess with Peter and MJ. You know, you get these literal kinds of catfight scenes, I suppose, for want of a better word, with her not pleased with the fact that MJ and Peter married, let's just say. And yeah, obviously we get the next appearances of Venom. So Venom, who had been created in the Michelinie-McFarlane run, reappears here for some further stories. And I've got to say again, just to go back to Erik Larsen's artwork, it's a very different way that he draws Venom compared to how McFarlane had drawn him. So with McFarlane drawing Venom, he'd actually look pretty normal, to be honest. As soon as Larsen starts drawing the character, that's really where we start to see the version of Venom that's got like a million teeth and a crazy mouth. Just a much more kind of visually exaggerated character. Now I kind of like it, I will say. You know, I've been a bit critical already of Erik Larsen's work up to this point, and I'm not going to pretend I love anything after I've said that, because the fact is it's just not my favourite art. But I do quite like some of the ways he draws Venom, but then again, like I said before already, sometimes in some of the panels where he draws him, it just looks so ridiculous and over the top. There's one in particular that I might find where he's just got such a ridiculously huge mouth that it's crazy. But no, this all looks pretty cool. I've got no problems with this, and it's a pretty good story. You know, these early Venom stories are really kind of repetitive because it's really just all about Venom out to get Spidey. You know, he just hates him. The symbiote hates him for rejecting it. But it's pretty cool. I think this is a story where he actually shows up at Aunt May's house and challenges Peter to a fight. I think that's what's going on. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's a fun story. You know, there's fun stories in here, and that's ultimately why I have the Omnibus, why I've got it in my collection. Because as a big Spider-Man fan, there is some good stuff in here, regardless of the fact that, like I say, I'm not the biggest Erik Larsen fan. Yeah, you get these couple of Marvel Comics Presents stories as well. I think this is a 2-part story featuring Wolverine. Can't really remember this one too much, to be honest. It's been quite a while since I read it. It's been a while since I read all the material in this book. But as it tends to be, you know, with stuff you read, there's some stuff you remember better than other stuff. I'll tell you what though, again, you know, I'm going to keep bringing this up, I think, but at the end of the day, this is an Erik Larsen omnibus, so I feel that it's a valid point to keep discussing his artwork. But the way he draws Mary Jane, I don't like. I will say right now, I'm not a fan of it. He draws her in this weird way with, you know, these kind of, I've lost the page now, but I'm sure we'll see another example. With these kind of weird, here we go. Yeah, these sorts of huge big lips, and I don't know, it's not great. But here we go. This is maybe the most memorable story in here. The return of the Sinister Six. Now, the cool thing about this is, or maybe the interesting thing about this, is that this is actually only the second time that the Sinister Six had appeared in any Spider-Man comic ever since Amazing Spider-Man Annual 1 back in, I think, 1964, which was in the Steve Ditko era. So, you know, kind of crazy to think now that Sinister Six are a pretty well-known team, pretty well associated with Spider-Man. You know, it's a kind of classic supergroup of villains. But it was about 26 years, I think, between them first appearing and then next appearing in this book. A very long time. But then finally they came back, and my God, Erik Larsen gets carried away with Doc Ock's arms. There are some panels in here, this being a great example, where I've just never seen such an extreme interpretation of his arms just kind of going all over the place, you know, to not just an unrealistic point of view, because obviously we're talking about superhero comics, a lot of things are unrealistic, technically speaking, but just an impractical way. I don't understand how he himself would be able to move around if his arms were doing that. But yeah, you know, you see some more examples of that throughout this run, definitely. But yeah, this whole story, this Return of the Sinister Six, it's very much like Doc Ock getting the band back together in a way, and trying to be the kind of the true leader of the team. You know, Doc Ock's got that kind of egotistical arrogance about him, so naturally he thinks he's the best person to lead the team and that all the others are inferior to him. So he's really just using them all to try and, you know, further one of his own plots, one of his schemes. And naturally the whole team up ends up falling apart, as villain team ups tend to do. But it's a good story. I think it's a 6-part story. Yeah, part 5 or 6 here. It is good. I had a fun time reading this one. But you know what? Overall, this whole era of Spider-Man, which is quite a long-lasting one, where Peter and MJ were married, I think that those were some of the best years, you know, of Spider-Man that there's been. I think it was a great time for Peter's personal life. I really liked the whole dynamic of him having MJ to kind of lean on, to support him, having somebody fully in his circle of trust like that, who knows that he's Spider-Man, knows exactly what he goes through, and supports him completely. Their relationship was so great during this time, and you know, obviously that came to a very annoying, frustrating end with One Last Day, but that's a story for another time. But I really did like this whole era. I think it's a lot of fun. It works really well because, as I said in pretty much all my Spider-Man reviews, I think, and I've done quite a few Omnibus reviews for Spider-Man at this point, when it comes to reading Spidey, it's one of those series where it's kind of equally interesting to read both Spider-Man adventures and heroics and just whatever Pete's got going on in his personal life. So it is important that you've got interesting Peter Parker stuff going on as well as interesting Spider-Man stuff going on. That's really the balance that I think creators need to find when they're writing Spidey stories. And I think that David Michelinie did a good job of that, because I like his whole run as a writer. So his stuff with McFarlane, Larsen, and Mark Bagley, who came on next after this. It's also interesting to see the relationship between Felicia and Flash as well, because she starts off pretty much just using him to try and get to Peter and MJ, and then she ends up starting to like him more and more and actually develop feelings for him. So that's pretty cool. It's all the sort of soap opera elements of the story. But really it's just good to see Black Cat back in action as well, because, you know, she'd been absent for quite a while up to this point. And I think she's one of the better supporting characters for Spider-Man when she's around, when she's used well anyway. And you know, she's definitely in a fair amount of this run. It's good to see, you know. So which issue are we up to now? Issue 345. Some more Venom in this story. Might be getting to the point. Maybe I've gone past it already, but that panel I was talking about with the super extreme Venom. Can't remember which issue it's in off the top of my head. I mean, sort of like that. That's a good example of the kind of Erik Larsen style of Venom. You know, all teeth and tongue. This is what I'm talking about. I mean, that's just crazy. You know, just look how exaggerated that is. I don't get it. You know, the jaw just wouldn't even fit on the mouth. It's weird. I mean, I know he's a symbiote. He's supposed to be all kind of warped. There is this body horror element to him in a way, but yeah, I don't know. It just looks a bit weird, that particular panel, to me. But it's just another story here, really, where, you know, yet again, Venom's just showing up for a fight. Another one there with that crazy long jaw. Yeah, I don't think that Venom is really best utilised in here, although this particular story is kind of interesting, and they kind of end up having this fight on an island. And the whole time Peter's just trying to get away. I think he ends up like faking his death to get away from Venom in the end. So so that I think Venom / Eddie actually thinks he's killed him. Yeah, so this is an interesting bit. This is where I think the Sandman had become a good guy, like he tries to reform. And for a while at least, he's playing hero. And then it all wraps up the Amazing Spider-Man run. Wraps up here with issue 350, which is a good issue just because it's got Doctor Doom in it. And I think generally speaking, if Doctor Doom appears in a story, it's usually pretty good. He's obviously definitely one of the best Marvel villains, and certainly in my opinion. Oh yeah, this would have been the 350th issue of Amazing, kind of a milestone issue. There's quite a lot of cool artwork in the back here, some cool pin-ups. This is probably the best way he ever drew Mary Jane. You know, all those issues in which he'd been drawing Mary Jane, and then this pin-up is probably the best version of her that he ever did. There's one of the kind of all-time classic iconic pieces of artwork, the 50% McFarlane, 50% Larsen pin-up image of Spidey. So then we move on to just Spider-Man, issue 15. This was a fill-in issue as well. McFarlane's last issue was 16 on that series. Erik Larsen came in as guest artist and writer. So for these Spider-Man issues, Larsen's not just the artist, he's writing them as well in the same way that McFarlane had been writing them. This issue, for a fill-in issue, actually pretty interesting concept. This is a big part of this issue just centers on a conversation between Spider-Man and the Beast, Hank McCoy, and he's just kind of talking to him about what are the chances that if him and MJ have a child, that child might be born a mutant because of his altered DNA. It's an interesting topic to bring up. Not that they make a huge thing about it. I mean, it's just one issue. But yeah, it's all right. And then, having mentioned that there'd been so many years between the first and second Sinister Six stories, Erik Larsen wasted nowhere near as much time. In his first proper story on Spider-Man, in fact his only story writing this series, he jumped straight into another multi-part Sinister Six story. This time, Revenge of the Sinister Six. And this one is just like pure craziness, Whereas if the one with Michelinie writing it felt pretty restrained and fairly grounded for a superhero story anyway. This one's just crazy, So many characters get brought into this. You get panels like this. This just has a pure extreme 90s feel about it, really. Just look at these. Just look at the panels here. It's just some of that really busy artwork. Not really my thing. More of the crazy arms of Doc Ock. Unbelievable. How long are those arms? Seriously. This one's not my favourite. Not a big fan of this second Sinister Six story in here. This is where Spider-Man becomes like part cyborg or something. So crazy. Yeah, look at this, giant cyborg robotic arm, whatever. I remember I actually had an action figure of that version of Spider-Man when I was a kid. Before I knew this comic existed, I had no knowledge of this story whatsoever, but I had a toy of that, and I couldn't figure out how Spider-Man would ever end up looking like that. And then years later to finally read this, once I got over the kind of shock of seeing that and realizing it was a real thing and not just some toy I had back in the day, I realized that probably what I came up in my imagination with back then to explain it was probably at least as good as this story. Being critical, maybe overly critical, but yeah, I'm not a fan of this one. This is what I would call the skippable section of the book overall, unless you are a massive Erik Larsen fan and just love his artwork. But since I don't, can't praise this much really. Hopefully, though, you get an idea. The thing about this book is, oh yes, these are a couple of issues from the 1999 series, and Erik Larsen briefly returned. I think it's 3 issues he draws. You can see it's at this point it's a more modern style, more modern colours. Aunt May literally looks like a ghost. Seriously, that woman is ancient. Yeah, more Venom. Yeah, the thing about this book though, it's out of print I think at the moment. I think it has been for a while actually, which, you know, obviously frustrating for anyone interested in it. I'm fully aware of what that's like when you want a book and it's out of print and hard to find. It sucks. But yeah, maybe this gives you an idea of whether or not you want to try hunting it down anywhere. Find a copy wherever you might find one. Or if, of course, Marvel end up reprinting it, which I feel like at some point they probably will, then, you know, maybe you'll just know whether or not you'll be interested in that as and when they decide to do that. Let's have a look at what we've got in the back in terms of extras. Usual sort of stuff, I think. Some pin-ups, covers. All Erik Larsen artwork, of course. I think there's some trading cards, yeah. Some original sketches, artwork. And then trade paperback covers, I think, or collection covers. Yeah, a lot of the usual sort of stuff. The reverse side of the hardcover as well, by the way, has this Sinister Six image on it, which is pretty good. Yeah, so that's a look at the Michelinie and Larsen Spider-Man Omnibus. Hopefully, as I say, it's been useful, interesting to watch. It's just not one of my favourites. You know, as much as I'm a big Spider-Man fan and have this book for that reason, I would probably rank this, well, close to the bottom of the Spider-Man material that I own. Probably just put McFarlane's Spider-Man run slightly below it. But yeah, this one isn't one that's on my most recommended stuff to read, I would say. But obviously you can make your own mind up, and I always encourage people to do that. The point of this really just to give you an idea of how quickly you might want to check it out. But anyway, guys, thanks for sticking with me and watching this. As always, I appreciate the support. Yeah, we'll be back again soon to talk about something else.